Good afternoon. I am Melanie White, President of the Women's Club. Welcome members in the auditorium and welcome to our members viewing online. Following today's program, all members should stay here in the auditorium for our annual meeting where we will elect our 2026 to 2028 officer slate and at-large governors and the members for the 2026 to 2027 nominating committee. If you are a guest, you may proceed to the reception in the Halsey Hall to meet our speaker. Members will join them after our election. Be assured you will have ample time to meet our speaker and enjoy our refreshments. Now, would you please silence your cell phones? Get in your purse, get them out, double check they're really off. Thank you. Our special events committee members have planned some good times to share together as we gather in small groups. Sign up for a day trip to the Ann Spencer House and Garden Museum and Poplar Forest on April 2nd. The deadline to sign up is March 2nd. Bring a friend interested in joining the Women's Club to our Become a Member luncheon on April 6th at 11 a.m. Our annual business meeting and luncheon is on April 13th, and the registration deadline is April 2nd. Sign up on the Programs tab in your members portal at twcrichmond.org or visit the Women's Club table at our reception today for assistance in registering for any of our upcoming special events. You were sent a form via email to fill out with your volunteer interests. Please update your form by March 2nd. If you are not interested in volunteering, just select the option "Not interested in volunteering" on that form. Thank you to the Bowling Haxel House Foundation for providing our refreshments today. And thank you to Linda Chance for serving as our chair of the day. Linda will now introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're in for a really very intriguing and interesting program today. So we welcome Dr. Kim Penberthy, who is the Chester F. Carlson Professor of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences, mouthful, at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. In addition, she is also a board-certified clinical psychologist and a researcher. She received her undergraduate and master's degree in experimental psychology from Wake Forest University and her PhD in clinical psychology from VCU. Dr. Penberthy completed her internship at Eastern Virginia School of Medicine in Norfolk and her fellowship at UVA in the Department of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences. All of her education has led her to do extensive exploration into the therapeutic implications of extraordinary human experiences, including near-death and after-death communications, as well as the clinical application of altered states of consciousness. Currently, she is leading a trial investigating the use of psilocybin for the individuals who might be suffering from prolonged grief disorder. Dr. Penberthy has published extensively, and her latest book is Living Mindfully Across the Lifespan, an Intergenerational Guide, and she wrote that with her daughter Morgan. Further, and to name only a few, Dr. Penberthy has presented to the International Association of Near-Death Studies, the International Society of Contemplative Research, and the American Psychological Association. And now it is our very great honor to have you present to the Women's Club today. Thank you.
don't think I've received such an amazing introduction before. That was fabulous. I want to make sure I think I'm getting feedback from this mic. Are we good?
Just push it down.
Push it away. There we go. Thank you. So can you hear me better now? All right. Maybe I stay right here. Is this good? I know there's our fella here to help if we need it. But if you can hear me, I'll proceed. So I am very honored to be here. This is an amazing crowd. Thank you so much. I hope to share a little bit about myself and my research and leave a real good amount of time to get questions and some feedback from you all as well. So I will tell you, oftentimes people ask me, how did you get involved in this research? And it is an unusual topic of research, especially when I started doing it 2 decades ago. I have to say, though, I feel like I have been doing this a good part of my life. So I had the good fortune to have parents who were very open-minded and scientists. And so I remember at a young age being exposed to the works of Raymond Moody. Many of you may be familiar with that. We read a lot of Swedenborg and about religious mystics in my family. My mother introduced me to meditation at an early age. I learned transcendental meditation. I was the child of a surgeon and an ICU nurse. And I remember at a young age, because of this exposure, asking some pretty big questions. One, and I was a little bit of a strange kid also. So I remember asking, and I would separate my parents because I didn't want them to cheat and collude and give an answer together. I asked them, I was very curious, what is the purpose of life? Like, why are we here? What is this about? And I thought this was a quite sophisticated, complicated question. But when I asked my mother, I went to her first, and she said, "Oh, darling, that is easy." And I was like, "Great, okay, so what is it?" And she said, the meaning of life, the purpose of life is love. And that sounded good to me. So I thought, that seems, although too simple maybe. So I went to my dad, the cardiothoracic surgeon, and I asked him, what is the purpose of life? Why are we here? He also said, well, that is easy. And I was like, okay, I wonder if he talked to Mom already. But he gave a different answer. And his was to reproduce. Because he's a scientist. And yes, biologically, what are we here for? To reproduce, to continue our genes. That's the strongest urge we have. So I grew up with this idea of both are true. But I wasn't done. So I also wanted to ask about the end part of life. What happens when we die? And if I had been smarter, I could have anticipated these answers. But looking back, I see. I asked my mother, what happens when you die? She said, you return to love, which I thought was beautiful. Then I had to ruin it and ask my dad. And he proceeded to give me a very in-depth description of the decomposition of your body. So, again, though, I carried with me from a very early age that
both of these can be reality. And so I hope during this time together, you will, whatever side you come from, middle or more woo-woo or more scientific, that you will open up your mind and just join the journey while we're here today. Because I really feel like the way I got into this was having that open mind and having experiences like that from my parents, and understanding that it's a very complicated thing that we're doing, this living and existing. And there's probably a lot more about it that we don't know. I will say another cute story from my childhood is because we were exposed to Raymond Moody and things like his psychomantium. I have early pictures of me compelling my siblings to enter the psychomantium that I had created. Early versions of scrying, if you remember what that is, this is looking into a body of water or a mirror or a crystal ball and connecting with those who passed on. So like I said, I was a weird little kid. These experiences, though, opened up something in me, a curiosity. I have to also say, for anyone here familiar with Greenbrier County, that's where I grew up in Lewisburg, West Virginia. From a very early age, I have to give this credit as well to my open-mindedness. We all knew about the Greenbrier ghost. Anyone here heard this story? Okay, there's a musical about it now. So this was literally the first and only documentation in a county courthouse of the testimony of a deceased individual. So as you can read here, there was a woman named Zona Hester, found dead at the bottom of the stairs in her home. They thought she just fell down the stairs. Little did they know that she actually had been married to a very nasty man, and Zona came to her mother, Mary Jane Hester, in a dream 4 times. They called it a dream. We would today call it an after-death communication, and told her how her pretty nasty husband, Erasmus, had broken her neck in a fit of rage and thrown her down the stairs. Mary Jane, the mother, as we can all imagine, persuaded the prosecutor to reopen the case. They exhumed Zona and found in an autopsy a broken neck. The trial occurred, and the prosecutor took it to the courthouse, and they had a testifying witness in Mary Jane who described her encounter with her daughter, Zona, and was allowed to give this evidence, and Erasmus was found guilty of murder. So this is the only documented instance in U.S. history where what we might call a ghost testimony convicted somebody. And growing up, we all knew the story. And we would take field trips, trotted down to the courthouse, and it's still there, the evidence of this. So to me, these things were really quite possible, and it was a world I lived in with science included in that. So, as you heard, I went on to get my education and got formal education in clinical psychology, experimental psychology. I am also a psychotherapist, so I still see patients as I do research, and most recently have been trained in both meditation and mindfulness-based interventions, as well as psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And I am a true clinician researcher. This is a model of training that some psychologists have, where we really are trained in both, that we do clinical work and we do research, and they feed each other. They really inform each other, and that's a big part of my identity as a researcher. I've also had the profound honor to work as a clinician in the cancer center at UVA from the time that they became a certified, national NCI certified center. I have been there working with patients and their families and been able to usher multiple people to the next phase of their existence. And so a lot of the work I do is informed by the individuals and the family members that I work with, and I need to honor them for that. I am able to do this work because of the endowment of Chester Carlson to the Division of Perceptual Studies. So for folks who are not familiar with who he is, he developed what we call Xerox. Hopefully you all know what that is. I lectured to a group of college students who didn't know what Xerox was. And that was very disturbing. Anyway, hopefully you know Xerox. Chester Carlson did not have children, and he left his estate to DOPS and this endowed chair, which I feel honored to have. But for those of you not familiar, the Division of Perceptual Studies is a research division within psychiatry and neurobehavioral sciences at the University of Virginia in the School of Medicine. We are the only division of research in the country that exists in this way to do this work. We've existed since 1967, so nowhere near as long as the Women's Club. But we've been around at least a good long while. For the work we do, that's pretty remarkable. It was founded by the chair, Ian Stevenson. If you're familiar with DOPS, you will know the name Ian Stevenson. He is the physician who did most of the early research in children who remember past lives. And we continue that research. I will not talk as much about that today, but that is still a robust area of research that we have. The mission of DOPS is to do research. We've added more missions at this point as well. We really evaluate empirical evidence for exceptional human experiences and capacities, specifically ones that bear on this question of mind and brain, if these are distinct and separable. We also have a key focus on whether consciousness survives physical death. So these are enormous questions that we try to bring scientific rigor to. As you can see from my history, that's right up my alley, so I feel right at home here. During my tenure there, as a clinician, I felt it was really very important that we also look at the impact of these experiences on humans. That had not really been the top priority for Ian Stevenson. He was early in the phases of exploring this, of just documenting it. And yet, as we moved into research on near-death experiences, after-death communications, what I was noticing as a clinician was these are really having impacts on people, and we need to explore that. Recently, we've also added another mission, which is education. That's part of what I'm doing here. And yet we need more specific education for our healthcare workers, because that's where a lot of this comes out and can be reported. And many times healthcare workers feel ill-equipped to handle that information. So, as I said, the big issue for us at DOPS, and I'll just refer to it as DOPS because the Division of Perceptual Studies, that's a big mouthful, is that the current mainstream science portrays mind, personality, consciousness, the soul, whatever you want to call it, that is what we are, as a byproduct of the brain. encased in our skull. So we are our brain, and our brain creates whatever this is that we are experiencing. And that when we die and our brain shuts down and decays, like my father described, we're gone. The problem is that doesn't seem to be the whole story based on thousands of years of experiences of people. So at DOPS, we study, is this really the case? Our big questions that we look at are mind and brain distinct and separable? Does consciousness survive death? Is the brain, this biological thing, really what creates mind? And the really big question is, how on earth does that happen? Believe it or not, no one has been able to understand that. How does a piece of meat, I mean, that's what it is, create consciousness? We don't know. And what are the impacts of this idea that maybe consciousness is different than just our brain? And really importantly, how on earth do we study this? Because again, we're talking sort of outside the realm of belief or religion. We're encased in a scientific paradigm. So how do we study that? So that's the challenge that we have had, that I've had for a majority of my career. And some of what we do is going to be what I talk about today. So there's a large array, and we can probably fill your speaker list for the next year if you want to, of wonderful, bright, intelligent, curious people that I work with. And many of them are represented in this work up here that we study. So you might be familiar with the name Bruce Grayson. So Dr. Bruce Grayson, I've worked with him my whole time at the University of Virginia, and he is the person who studies near-death experiences. He's written books on this. He's world-renowned for this area. He's currently an emeritus professor, still doing research. As he says, he's still doing research, just not getting paid for it. And he's quite active. Jim Tucker is the person who took over the research from Ian Stevenson, and he studies children who remember past lives. It is sometimes called CORT research, C-O-R-T, which is a term that Ian Stevenson used, I think, to fool people. I'm not sure. It stands for cases of the reincarnation type, so C-O-R-T. And that was a nod to the scientific world that they're cases of reincarnation type. We're not claiming that, yes, we know these are reincarnations. So that work is still being done. We have a wonderful colleague who studies out-of-body experiences. She comes from Brazil, where, believe it or not, there are schools you can go to learn how to have an out-of-body experience intentionally. And so she studies the individuals who are able to do that. I am the one working in after-death communications. These are literally, communications from those who have passed on. All of us work in spontaneous altered states of consciousness, and what I will be talking about today with after-death communication will be more spontaneous ones. I have studied for decades meditation and mindfulness and the impact both on our physical health and also our mental health and healing. I won't be talking much about that today, but that's another line of research. And we look at the neurophysiology. So for many of these studies, we're looking at imaging of your brain as you are experiencing things. We look at changes in your heart rate, changes in stress hormones in your blood. So we're looking at this as well. And as was mentioned, the most recent, the newest line of research that I've taken on is looking at psychedelic research. I will tell you, when I brought this up 3 years ago to my chair and the different people in leadership at UVA, they told me it would never happen. UVA is too conservative. No one will approve this. You won't be able to get it approved by the Institutional Review Board. You won't get funding. So that was my challenge. And like probably many of you, you tell me no, and I'm gonna work really hard to prove you wrong. I did prove them wrong. So we got funding from the Brain Institute at UVA and from a lovely foundation out in California, because that's where you get funds for this stuff, called the Tiny Blue Dot, and they have given us over $1 million to do this work now, and we will be talking about that a little bit too. The reason I wanted to look into psychedelics, as you all may have assumed right now and made the connection, is that many of these things that we study that happen spontaneously, out-of-body experiences that happen spontaneously, or a near-death experience, or an after-death communication, or communication with ancestors, they happen when you are on certain psychedelics as well. So we can actually induce this, we can actually create it. And in a research world, it's much easier to study something you create on purpose than to wait around for things to just happen. So for me, this was an obvious sort of direction to go in to further our research. I do want to make it very clear, I think this is important for all of us to remember that we are not the first people doing this. And I don't mean just recognizing Ian Stevenson. I mean our own ancestors, the ancestors that lived on this land thousands of years ago, the ancestors that lived in our homelands thousands of years ago. We're all curious about this as well. So we are by no means the first, nor the experts. I do think, though, it is important to recognize we're carrying this on and maybe applying a different lens to it in the scientific lens that we bring from DOPS. But I feel like that's really important to honor. All right, so I'm going to get into the good stuff now and talk about some of the research that I've done over the past 5 years or so. I don't know if I move around, you can't hear me, can you? So I think it's not on. It's back behind me, that's why I'm doing this. So, all right, I'll stay here, it'll be fine. So literally, an after-death communication is just like it sounds. It's when a person experiences this unexpected contact from a deceased person in a manner that is indicative as a continuation. So it's perceived as, oh, I know who this is. So I have heard of some people getting after-death communications from strangers. That is much more rare. It does happen. I want to give that caveat. Most of the time, when we have collected data, it is from a person that is known. And as I said, the research data that I'm going to share with you right now is the spontaneous data. So we're not talking about individuals who went to a medium or anything like that. This is, it just happened to you spontaneously. And it's direct. So again, just you and that individual. And it conveys a message. So most of the time, it is conveying a reassuring, resolving, or reaffirming message, or sometimes releasing you from something. All right, I'm not sure which mic is working now. All right. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, I think this is on now. Maybe how I fiddled worked. Okay. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about with after-death communication. And someone approached me earlier. Oh, could I get to move? This is good. This feels better. Someone approached me earlier about an aroma. What about an aroma? Absolutely. So after-death communications that we're talking about are anything that the individual perceives as a communication from someone who's deceased. And there has been an extensive amount of research on this internationally. We may not be so aware of it in the US, but what I'm going to show you is a big international study that we did that is ongoing, where we're trying to get information about after-death communications from every country in the world. And when we talk about these communications, there are basically about 12. Now they keep growing, and I'll tell you why here in a second. The forms keep expanding. So sensing a presence is the first and the most prevalent. This is just feeling like they're there, feeling like someone is in the room. And that is the most common. Hearing a voice, feeling a touch. People feel stroke on their cheek or a hand on them. Smelling a fragrance, so that's to the individual who asked about aromas. Visual experiences, so you may see a more solid form or a more ephemeral form. Most often, these visits come while you're sort of in the twilight consciousness, so as you're falling asleep or you're waking up in the morning, this seems to be a common occurrence. And sometimes you see a full-on image of the individual that looks almost real. The twilight experiences I talked about. You also can have after-death communications while you're sleeping. And there's a whole line of research looking at this, of how they differentiate an after-death communication from a dream. Because you can have both. You can dream about someone who's passed on. You can also have a communication. And they are qualitatively described differently by people who experience them. They're often more intense and real, and the memory sticks longer. You know how in dreams, most people, you sort of, unless you write it down, you forget it. But the after-death communications, you don't forget. You can have out-of-body after-death communications, where you may move to them. So you might be out of your body and experience that you're with them somewhere else. This is what I was talking about. Now, there are growing in reports of these more physical phenomena. So there's always been reports of things like lights going out, candles being blown out, items being moved. Now we're seeing more phone calls, text messages, emails. And if you think about it, if we're construing this as some existence of potentially some energy, some energetic force that is what consciousness is, or whatever you want to call the soul or personality, that could move a lamp or blow out a candle, well, they certainly could send an email. It's energy. Most of the tools we have to communicate now, phones, back when there were pagers, people got pages. So, I think whatever sort of form of communication, there seemed to be a way to, find after-death communications there. And of course, we often hear about symbolic after-death communications. And these are sort of in a boundary area where often this is more psychological. Like, I see a butterfly, and that reminds me of my grandmother because she loved butterflies, and she said she'd come back as a butterfly. So we see forms like that many times. It's coins, the placement of coins, feathers, birds, things like that are special. Now here's the really interesting part. So you might think, well, these after-death communications, that's all good and well that you've got them defined and you're talking about them and everything. And we think of them as anomalous. sort of strange outlying type of things that happen. And yet, this study, this was a report from the Pew Research Institute, which many of you may be familiar with the Pew polls. They did a poll of Americans in April of 2023. It came out. And it showed that about 53% of Americans reported having an after-death communication in their lifetime, defined the way we just defined it. And 44% said they had had one in the past year. So I don't know about you, but those numbers don't seem anomalous. Anomalous would be 1%, 5%, but these are almost half of Americans, polled randomly. So these are the critics, the skeptics, the believers, everybody. And if you look at the data, there is data on this worldwide, as I said. Anywhere between 25 to 60% of mourners report experiencing one or more spontaneous after-death communications. And the difference there, 25 to 60, is a lot of difference in the way they ask it. So do you include the symbolic? Do you include the dreams, that sort of thing? Some ways of asking can make it seem larger or smaller. It's not zero, though, and it's not 1% or 5% or 10%. So these are fairly large numbers, which starts to make you think, well, is this, it's so common, maybe this is a natural experience that we have as a human. So the other thing to look at in this research that we've done, and I'm not boring you with all the numbers and p-values and significant levels, so I'm just sort of getting straight to it here. Because we've been criticized, well, maybe these just happen in religious people or people who believe in this, or maybe it happens in people who are mentally ill. So we've looked at this, and they seem to occur in all nationalities, ethnicities, religious affiliations, income levels, educational levels. It's not just the people with a certain kind of background. It's across the board. And there's plenty of studies where we look at, are these individuals reporting after-death communications suffering from a thought disorder or some other kind of mental illness? And no, that is not the case. They are free from mental illness typically. An interesting thing that you do see when you look deeply at the literature is there is one group that seems to have these more than any other group. And it's people who lost a partner or spouse. So, and women specifically who've lost a partner or spouse. So we don't really know why this is. We thought, though, with our big database that we would go ahead and do a deeper dive and look at that. So the database I'm talking about is about 993 people. This is from Europe, so most of Europe, including like down to Italy and not including Greece though, and then the US and Canada. And we asked them about whether or not they had an after-death communication and to describe it. So most of them, the vast majority, reported that it was life-changing or very important. This was something very positive in their life. So these are not things that are necessarily happening and distressing the individual. Only 12% said that it was frightening. And when we did a deeper dive into that 12%, what we found out was that the ones that were really frightened, can you guess why? Because they had reported it and someone told them they were crazy. So they thought they were losing their mind. So this is comparable to most of the previous research, that the vast majority of these experiences are seen as positive. We also measured changes in their other aspects, their beliefs and things like that. So we looked at their belief in life after death and the fact that a deceased can communicate with the living, and we saw increases in that. And as a cognitive behavioral therapist, to me that makes sense because they had evidence. You know, I now have evidence that this is the case, so of course I'm going to believe it a little bit more. We also found, again important to me as a clinician, that having an after-death communication seemed to have a significant impact on reducing the fear of death and dying. This is another big area that I work in, is fear of death and dying, because there's nothing worse. I mean, I'm sure many of you have seen a bad death, what we call a bad death, and it's horrible to see someone enter into that death process just fighting and miserable and terrified. And so to know that there's something that might help that, might help reduce that fear is important to me. We also measured religiosity, so we asked them about, do they have a formal religion they participate in, and did it increase, their religiosity? It did not. If they were religious and a believer, it stayed the same. What did happen is people became what they called more spiritual. So they endorse significantly more spirituality. Now the problem is, it's hard to know what that means to people, but we know it was different than religiosity. They became more spiritual. Maybe it's correlated to these earlier things. We're not sure. We'll need to study that a bit more. So as I said, we wanted to look more deeply at this larger population that we had, which was the widows and widowers, folks that lost partners, and focus on that. And we wanted to see who was having this and what their relationship was with the deceased and the impact on them specifically. So 81% reported that their perceived ADC brought them comfort. So to me, this, again, as a clinician, this is good to hear. This is good to know. 84% considered it important in their bereavement process. And as you will see, this is important to think about. It doesn't make the grief go away, as you can imagine. Nothing's going to make the grief go away. What they describe is it changes the relationship with the grief. 63% said that their relationship with their deceased deepened. It's almost comical how many women said their relationship with their husband is even better now that he's not here. Apologies to the men in the room. So this is the good news, though, gentlemen. They wanted more contact. So many people inviting it, wanting more. Some reporting, so about half reporting a reduction in sadness, but as I said, it doesn't make it go away. It maybe is not so deep. Many people, 60%, endorsed increased spirituality, very similar to our larger population. And many of them said it did not make the physical absence more painful. So it's not as if this is like a finger in a wound. It really is still genuinely seen as a positive thing. So overall, we really think, I had to AI generate that, and it was just so strange, I had to put it up there. I'm not sure who that is supposed to be, God or Jesus or something. But overall, it's important to me to see this and to understand that the experience really is perceived as authentic. People feel very strongly about this. It is real to them. They have a decreased fear of death. it's profound, it's significant. They have increased spirituality, again, whatever that means to them. It brings comfort and healing. It helps in their bereavement process. They do have an increased belief in life after death, whatever that might look like. Maybe not reincarnation, maybe some other realm, some continuation, but enough that they have a relationship with them. And this experience is treasured. Many people, the majority, endorsing it ranks above having a child. It's up there as in the top 2 or 3 of their experiences in their lifetime. So very profound. So here's the question I have as a scientist. I come in, I see this, I'm super excited about it. Maybe this is a way to help individuals reduce their fear of death, connect with their loved ones, work through the bereavement. But why on earth would it work? So here's the nerdy part. It can help us integrate what is an often quoted theory about grief is this attachment. You are attached to someone and they die. And your mind wants a continuation of that attachment. And in our materialistic world, we are told over and over again, they're gone, they're dead, they're gone, their body died, they're gone. And it's this conflict. They don't feel gone, but everyone's telling me they are gone. We put them in the ground, they're gone. So maybe the after-death communication helps us buck that system and say, no, they're not. And I get chills just saying that. So we can see this also in the circuitry in the brain. So in the research we're beginning now, we're actually looking at functional magnetic resonance imaging, so the brain operating and looking at changes in that before and after someone has one of these out-of-body experiences. I won't bore you with the details, but it's basically with grief, what happens is the prefrontal cortex, so that thinking part of your brain, is not strong enough to overcome that separation, the amygdala, that's up there with that separation distress, the yearning. Grief is so different than depression. Grief is including a yearning. I want this person back. I'm craving this person. And that's the nucleus accumbens. So that is powerful. It's activated along with your amygdala. Your hippocampus and related regions are remembering them all the time. So you can imagine that's just keeping you in this space of mourning. And the prefrontal cortex that would provide some relief is just not strong enough. So we want to explore this. Does the after-death communication help quiet down those other areas and allow that prefrontal cortex then to sort of exercise what it needs effectively? So that's sort of what I've covered here. That leads me to what we're doing now in this arena. Grief has become a very important part of my work and my research. I've lost my mother when she was only 66. I had the privilege of being with my father when he died at 81 and seeing him literally pass before my eyes. I do have to share this with you. You may have your own stories. My father was a surgeon, as I said. That was a very important part of his identity. And that was one of the challenges he had when he retired, is that he was not a surgeon anymore in our little tiny town. And he stayed involved as much as he could. He would educate anybody who came around. When he passed, he died of cancer, and he slowly sort of withered away. He was finally in a facility for comfort. And he was gone. He was not recognizing people. He was not responding. His eyes were closed. I was playing his favorite music for him, which is Dave Brubeck, Take 5. He always played that in the OR. And he started doing surgery. He was doing these things, and I said, "What is he doing?" And my brother said, "He's doing surgery." And we're like, he went to the big OR in the head. So I don't know, you might meet him up there someday. I didn't know there were surgeons in heaven, but apparently he was doing surgery. Amazing. Such an honor, though. I know many of you have experienced this loss as well, and it's just such a profound thing. I would, if nothing else comes of today, I just hope that this will help you talk about it. Because I really think what we need in our society now, and I'm not going to get political, don't worry, I think we need to be able to pull death and dying out of the shadows and talk about it. And I think that will help us a lot for a lot of different reasons, but I hope that this encourages you to talk about it. So the work we are beginning to do now, this is a line of work that was from one of my colleagues. Her name is Jan Holden. She's the president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies and a counselor, and she has studied near-death experiences and after-death communications most of her career. She's out at Texas Tech and just retired. She really wanted to look at, well, can we verify these after-death experiences? We know, I like to look at the clinical implications, how they impact people. She likes to say they are real. So what we're doing is we have a large study now that is looking at people who say that they have proof that they had an after-death communication. And we're recording their stories, and we're going to be analyzing them. So what we're looking at are individuals who say, yes, I had this experience, this information came to me through a message, and I have it. Here's the text message and the timestamp, and this person was with me and saw the same thing I saw. So these are things where people have either a witness or some evidence time-stamped that can't be manufactured. And we're collecting these from around the world. And we were floored. We opened up our survey asking for this, and we had about 8,000 responses right away. So this is happening to people, and they want to share. Now, not all of those are going to meet our criteria. We have a way of sort of going through and making sure that we can validate these. So it's like detective work. So we're doing that. As was mentioned, I'm looking at using psilocybin, which is the ingredient that's in what are called magic mushrooms. So looking at using that in a clinical trial specifically for people with prolonged grief. So we've been talking about grief. There is a pathological version of grief, which is grief with these significant symptoms that last a year or longer. And this is now in our diagnostic and statistic manual. It's a code that you can put in and get insurance to reimburse you. So that's what allows finally to do research in it because it's now real, even though it's been real forever. So what we're looking at in this study, I'll talk to you a little bit about. And we're looking at induced after-death communications and ongoing ways to include the community in discussions and educate the community, get feedback from the community. So thank you for that today here. So the verifiable after-death communications I've talked about. So it would be something like this, where you have someone say, I had a visit from my mother and my husband was in the room and saw her too. So we can get information from both parties. We're videotaping this. We're going to transcribe it. We're going to record it. These will be sort of archived. So we will have this for generations and then do a meta-analysis of what we find. So that is ongoing, and that's worldwide. The psilocybin Again, what we're hoping for there is, as I said, to induce some of these experiences. We know psilocybin works on those areas that I just showed you in the brain, so it is ideal for grief. We did a thorough review. We did all kinds of research and produced this paper down here in 2024 about why psilocybin would be ideal for this. It disrupts the rigid thought patterns that are there when you're in grief, when you're sort of stuck, enhances that neuroplasticity, so it allows some more flexibility in thinking and more openness. And as I said, you often have these transformative experiences of connecting with ancestors or a deceased loved one or having an out-of-body experience. So we want to induce that intentionally. Some other experiences it creates are this ego dissolution, which is where you sort of merge with everyone. You're no longer you, just different and individual, but sort of part of humanity, feeling connected, like I said, an out-of-body experience. The big one we're looking for is this ADC, a connection there. And what we're hoping for is some symptom reduction, similar to what we see in after-death communications that are spontaneous. And as I said, we're going to collect information about how their brain is working. We do this through what's called a grief elicitation. So when the individual comes to us with prolonged grief, we ask them who they're grieving, and we get a picture. Then we get a picture of another family member who's alive, and then we have a picture of a stranger. And while they're in the fMRI machine, we ask them to focus on the picture and think about that person. And so we're looking at what is happening in their brain. And we're going to do that before and after the psilocybin. We're also going to be looking at some cognitive functioning. There are certain tests that we can do that look at attention and cognitive function, because we know people with prolonged grief often have impaired cognition. They forget things, they can't attend. So we're looking to see if that improves. And, you know, we're embedded in a medical school, and that filters into everything I do. Many of you may know a big thing in medicine is tailored treatment, is really tailoring it to the person, especially as we've got more and more information about our genetics or DNA, things like that. So my thought is, and this has been well received by my colleagues, that in many ways this might help elicit exactly what the individual needs. So the idea is the psilocybin can open you up to a lot of these experiences. We're going to work with the person up front before their psilocybin experience and talk about their grief, talk about where they're stuck. And I'll share one. This gentleman has given me permission to share this. I had treated his wife, who died from metastatic breast cancer. She was a devout Catholic. She knew she was dying. She put her affairs in order. She knew where she was going. She was good. She was ready to die. She had a good death. She told me, I am worried about him. And sure enough, he came back to me several months later, and he met criteria for prolonged grief. He was miserable. And I worked with him to find out what was this about. And this is what I'm talking about, the stuck. What he told me finally, after about 3 or 4 sessions, this was his childhood sweetheart. They grew up together. They got married. They'd been married 50 plus years, raised 2 kids. He said, I loved her with every fiber of my being. I don't know if she loved me. This doubt had creeped in. And I still get chills. I mean, he was just devastated because now he would never know. And he was ruminating on this. He could not get beyond this. And it had stopped his world. And you know what? I didn't have the psilocybin study. I couldn't offer him that. I offered him a course in deep meditation. That man struggled for 6 months to learn how to meditate. He hated it. He thought it was a bunch of woo-woo. He finally was able to do it and got into a rhythm. And one day he came to his appointment and he said, I think I'm better. And I was like, praise the Lord, what happened? He said, I was meditating and I really got into it. I really got it. And she came to me. And it was very intimate. He said, I'm not going to share all the details. I said, that is fine. Because it was very intimate. It was a very loving presence. And he knew that she loved him. And that's what he needed. So for him, that he needed that connection because of that yearning and that feeling disconnected, unanswered questions. So that's just an example of what I'm hoping, the disbeliever maybe can encounter a creator. Someone depressed might have an experience of profound love or joy. So I'm hoping that this will go this way. The evidence so far is proving me right, so I feel thrilled about that. We're also venturing into what's called induced after-death communication. Now, this is sort of a misnomer. That's the title that's given to this treatment. It's a meditation-type program that helps you get into that space that I talked about, that this gentleman got into. So it's sort of an opening, it's quieting your mind and sort of opening up. But we're going to be doing that while we're doing some EEG collection and looking at what's happening in the brain. Many people ask me, well, how do I do that? So here's some instructions if you want to try. It's really being open. That can be through meditation or just putting aside expectations. Understanding you may feel a little anxious, but also just noticing what's happening and not judging yourself and just being prepared. It's really an invitation, a genuine invitation to open, to receive. So we've had good luck with this so far. And I'm wrapping up now, so I probably don't have to convince you all, but I think it is important to say why. Why do we do all of this? There is a global mortality shock, if you hadn't noticed. And what I mean by that is, well, first of all, we had the wave of COVID, where we had people dying we never expected would die. We have estimated almost 15 million excess deaths due to that and ongoing. We know it's a burden. This bereavement burden dwarfs the death toll. So the estimates are that for every person who died, there's about 9 close people who are grieving them, often much more. Ongoing wars, displacement, all the death that we see around us is creating more and more of this, because for everyone who dies, there's people grieving them. For everyone who dies, there's people fearful of death. So it is not a niche problem. This is not even though our numbers may be 20 to 60% who experience after-death communication, we all will experience grief. And many of us will experience prolonged grief. You know the number one kind of person who has prolonged grief? Someone who lost someone to suicide. So this is really important that we address options to help people. And for me, the more the better. We need more tools in our chest to help address this prolonged grief disorder. We know that currently our treatments are not very effective. For instance, the antidepressants that we may use for depression don't work on grief. It's a different thing. And across the lifespan, you see increasing rates of it because there are increasing risk factors. more people killing themselves, more wars, more sudden deaths. And for these young people, we're specifically focused on young adults, because what we know from the literature is if you develop prolonged grief without treatment, you will have it the rest of your life. And that's a miserable existence that we hope we can get people out of. So I will end on this. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to my team and my funders for being able to do this work and talk with you today.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was powerful. I'm going to give just a moment for our guests to leave so that we can have our business meeting. All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I promise you this will be no more than 5 or 6 minutes. I would like to start by introducing Barbara Gibson, who was the chair of our nominating committee. I thank Barbara so very, very much for answering all those phone calls when I was trying to decipher yet another detail of our bylaws as we worked through nominating committee. I also thank her and all of the nominating committee members for putting together what I would call a dream team for our governor's slate. And now I'm going to give the podium to Barbara so that she can announce the nominating committee board. Excuse me, this is the nominating committee by name.
It has been my pleasure to serve as chair of the nominating committee this year, and it's been made especially lovely because we have such a strong nominating committee who all work diligently to make sure that we had a strong slate of officers and at-large governors to present to you today. So when I read their names, just if you hold applause until the end, we had Sarah Gray, Pat Hackler, Rebecca Hickman, Kim Ruscio, Sandy Treadway, and Jamie Upton. And as ex officio members, we had Melanie White, Sylvia Buffington Lester, and Sally Switters. Now, I'd like the slate of board nominees, officers, and at-large governors to come up on the stage, and then I will introduce you. As long as they were counted, they're fine. I don't think that Sylvia Buffington Lester really needs any introduction to this group because she has served as president-elect for the past 2 years. When a person is elected as president-elect, they're really elected for 4 years, 2 years as president-elect and 2 years as president. So on May 1st, Sylvia will become our president. And now I will present the slate that you will be called on to elect this afternoon. The first is our next president-elect, Robin R. Hurst. Our Vice President of Communications, Sandra G. Treadway. Vice President of Finance, Elizabeth B. Daly. Vice President of Hospitality, K.A. Holmes. Vice President of Human Resources, Terry C. Miles. Vice President of Membership, Betty A. Walker. Vice President of Programs, Charla E. Eastep. And our Recording Secretary, Maria A. Curran. We also have 4 at-large governors to be elected today. Priscilla Cash, and 3 who are out of town, having a wonderful vacation somewhere. Probably, I hope not in the middle of any of this snowstorm that a lot of our country is experiencing right now, but that is Jennifer Cornell, Margaret E. Ivey, and Elizabeth Bray Wagner. On behalf of the nominating committee and the Board of Governors, I move the election of the slate of officers and at-large governors as presented.
There is a motion on the floor presented on behalf of the nominating committee and the Board of Governors. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Congratulations to our newly elected officers. It is now my honor to announce the nominations that I have made as president to be nominated to be appointed by the Board of Governors during its March meeting. And if you would please stand as your name is called. The chair of the nominating committee will be Pat Hackler. And members are Elizabeth Wagner and Jan Nelson. And now I'm going to ask Barbara back to the podium to announce the nominating committee's nominees for the 2026 to 2027 nominating committee. That's a tongue twister.
The nominating committee has the opportunity to nominate 4 members of our club to serve on the nominating committee in the upcoming year. And this year's nominating committee has nominated Holly Halter, Markia Johnson, Lenore Kopelovich, and Barbara Baker Wright. On behalf of the nominating committee and the Board of Governors, I move the election of the slate of the 2026-27 nominating committee members as presented.
There is a motion on the floor presented on behalf of the nominating committee and the Board of Governors. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? So moved. Congratulations to our newly elected nominating committee members. There being no further business, I conclude our annual business meeting, and please proceed to the Halsey Hall to meet our speaker and enjoy refreshments.